Before the tattoos, before the headlines, before the arguments, the controversies, and the millions of fans around the world, there was XXXTENTACION, born Jahseh Ricardo Onfroy. And his story does not begin with music. It begins with instability, a life that never settled. Jahseh was born on January 23, 1998, in Plantation, Florida. From the very beginning, his life lacked consistency. His father was incarcerated when Jahseh was still very young, leaving him to grow up without a stable male presence. This absence created a hole that never fully closed. His mother loved him, but their relationship was strained. Arguments were common, financial pressure was constant. Jahseh moved frequently, living with different relatives, switching homes, neighborhoods, and schools. There was never a place that truly felt permanent. For a child, that kind of instability does more than create stress. It creates confusion about identity. A child with too much emotion. From an early age, Jahseh showed signs of intense emotional sensitivity. He felt everything deeply: anger, sadness, rejection, frustration. But no one taught him how to process those feelings. Instead, they built up. Small conflicts felt personal. Disrespect felt like betrayal. Criticism felt like an attack. Without guidance, Jahseh reacted the only way he knew how: through aggression. School, where it all went wrong. In school, Jahseh struggled to adapt. Teachers described him as intelligent but volatile. He had trouble focusing, obeying rules, or accepting authority. Arguments with classmates quickly escalated into physical fights. His reputation grew, not as a troublemaker, but as someone unpredictable. Eventually, suspensions turned into expulsions. There was never a place that truly felt permanent. Education, the one path that could have offered structure, disappeared early in his life. Isolation and anger. As Jahseh grew older, isolation became his normal state. He didn't trust easily. He felt misunderstood. The world seemed hostile, and he responded with hostility of his own. Violence wasn't a goal, it was a reaction. Every fight pushed him further from stability and deeper into a cycle of self-destruction. But beneath the anger, there was something else. A mind full of questions. Those close to Jahseh noticed contradictions. He could be aggressive one moment, then quiet and reflective the next. He asked questions most kids his age didn't ask. Why do people suffer? Why does life feel unfair? Why does pain feel permanent? He spoke about death, purpose, and meaning long before fame entered his life. Music slowly entered the picture, not as ambition, but as expression. There was never a place that truly felt permanent. Early trouble with the law. Jahseh's behavior eventually brought him into contact with the juvenile justice system. Encounters with police and authority became more frequent. For many young men, this is where paths permanently diverge. For Jahseh, it led to one of the most important periods of his life: juvenile detention, forced silence. Time spent in juvenile detention removed distractions. There were no friends, no chaos, no constant noise, just silence. And in that silence, Jahseh confronted himself. He began reading obsessively: philosophy, psychology, spiritual texts. He questioned his behavior, his anger, and the direction his life was heading. For the first time, he didn't just react, he reflected. A desire for transformation. Detention didn't magically change Jahseh, but it planted something powerful: awareness. He realized that anger was destroying him, that his reactions were costing him his future, that without change, his story would end early. He didn't want to be remembered as just another violent statistic. He wanted meaning. Returning to the same world changed. When Jahseh returned home, the environment hadn't changed. The streets were the same. The pressure was the same. The temptation to fall back into chaos was still there. But something inside him was different. He wanted to reinvent himself. The birth of a new identity. This is where XXXTENTACION was born, not just as a name, but as a symbol. The name represented contradiction, darkness and growth, anger and vulnerability, chaos and reflection. Jahseh began experimenting with music seriously for the first time. He didn't care about quality. He didn't care about trends. He cared about honesty. Music without rules. He uploaded songs to SoundCloud that broke every rule. Tracks were short, distorted, raw. Lyrics were uncomfortable, emotional, and sometimes disturbing. He screamed. He whispered. He confessed. There was no structure, just emotion. Most artists would have been ignored. He wasn't. Early listeners feel something different. People didn't just hear his music. They recognized themselves in it. Pain, rage, confusion, loneliness. Feelings most people were afraid to admit. He put them into sound. Slowly, an audience began to form. Not fans, believers. When Jahseh returned to the outside world and began releasing music as XXXTENTACION, nothing about his rise followed a traditional path. There was no label plan, no radio strategy, no industry guidance. What happened next was chaotic, unpredictable, and fueled entirely by the internet. The internet as a weapon, SoundCloud became Jahseh's battlefield. At a time when many artists were trying to sound polished and industry-ready, XXXTENTACION did the opposite. His music was distorted, aggressive, and uncomfortable. It didn't aim to entertain, it aimed to provoke emotion. And the internet responded immediately. His songs spread through reposts, forums, and word of mouth. People didn't discover him through playlists. They discovered him through arguments. Who is this guy? Why does this sound so angry? Why does this feel real? Every reaction, positive or negative, pushed his name further. Look at me. And the moment everything changed, the song Look at Me became the turning point. It wasn't complex, it wasn't lyrical, it wasn't clean, but it was explosive. The raw energy, distorted bass, and unfiltered aggression made it impossible to ignore. The track spread like wildfire, especially among younger listeners who felt disconnected from mainstream rap. Suddenly, XXXTENTACION wasn't underground anymore. He was unavoidable. Viral fame without control. The problem was that fame arrived faster than stability. Jahseh had no management team prepared for sudden attention. No mentors, no structure. He was still emotionally volatile, still learning, still reacting instinctively. The internet didn't care. Clips of him screaming on stage went viral. Arguments online turned into headlines. Every outburst became content. Instead of shaping his image, the image shaped him. Conflict with authority and industry. As his name grew, so did conflict. Venues canceled shows. Authorities monitored him closely. The industry didn't know how to handle him. XXXTENTACION wasn't just an artist. He was a liability. At the same time, his fan base became fiercely loyal. Many saw him as someone who represented their anger, pain, and frustration with the world. This created a dangerous dynamic. The more controversial he became, the stronger his core audience grew. A cult following forms. XXXTentacion's fans didn't act like fans. They acted like defenders. They related deeply to his emotions and saw attacks on him as attacks on themselves. Online communities formed around his music, his mindset, and his message. For many, he wasn't just a rapper. He was a voice for people who felt ignored. Legal troubles enter the spotlight. As his fame expanded, Jahseh's legal issues followed him into the public eye. Allegations, arrests, and court cases became part of the narrative. Media coverage intensified. For some, this confirmed their worst opinions of him. For others, it reinforced the idea that he was a product of trauma and a broken system. The truth became secondary to the spectacle. Internal struggle. Under the surface, behind the scenes, Jahseh was conflicted. Fame didn't heal his anger. Money didn't erase his trauma. Attention didn't bring peace. He oscillated between self-destruction and self-reflection. One moment he lashed out publicly. The next he spoke about wanting to change. The beginning of a shift. As time passed, something subtle began to change. XXXTentacion started speaking openly about mental health, depression, anxiety, trauma. He encouraged fans to look inward, to grow, to seek help. For the first time, his platform wasn't just about rage. It was about awareness. Many didn't believe him. Others felt he was finally being honest. Regardless, the tone was changing. Music evolves with him. His sound began to shift. The aggression softened. Melody entered the picture. Lyrics became more introspective. Songs felt like journal entries. Confessions recorded in real time. He sang about loneliness, guilt, fear, and the desire to improve. This wasn't a rebrand, it was evolution. Fame and responsibility collide. With a massive audience came responsibility. Something Jahseh struggled to carry. Every word mattered. Every action was analyzed. Every mistake was magnified. He wasn't ready for that level of scrutiny, and yet he couldn't escape it. A young man running out of time. By the end of this chapter, XXXTENTACION stood at a crossroads. One path led toward growth, accountability, and change. The other led back into chaos, conflict, and destruction. He spoke openly about wanting to be better, about wanting peace, about wanting to leave a positive impact. But life doesn't pause while people figure themselves out. By the time XXXTENTACION reached the peak of his fame, his life had become a constant contradiction. He was one of the most talked about artists in the world. At the same time, he was one of the most misunderstood. Millions listened to his music every day, yet very few truly understood the weight he was carrying. Trying to outrun the past. As 2018 approached, Jahseh was actively trying to change the direction of his life. He spoke often about growth, discipline, and self-awareness. He talked about wanting to be remembered for something positive, not just chaos, but change is slow and the internet is fast. Every mistake followed him. Every headline reminded the world of his past. Every attempt at growth was questioned, analyzed, and often dismissed. Still, he kept going. A different side of XXXTENTACION. Away from the headlines, Jahseh showed a quieter side. He spoke about meditation, spirituality, and self-improvement. He encouraged fans to read, to think critically, and to look inward. He began addressing his audience not as fans, but as people who were hurting. He told them, "If you feel lost, you're not alone." For many, those words mattered more than any song. Fame without safety. Despite his success, Jahseh's life lacked structure and protection. He moved freely, often without proper security. He trusted too easily. He believed that personal growth would protect him from danger. But fame doesn't erase risk. In fact, it often increases it. The more visible he became, the more vulnerable he was. The day everything stopped on June 18, 2018, XXXTENTACION was in Deerfield Beach, Florida. It was a normal day. No concert, no performance, no major event. Just routine. While sitting in his vehicle outside a motorcycle dealership, he was approached by attackers during a robbery. Moments later, gunshots rang out. XXXTENTACION was fatally wounded. He was pronounced dead shortly after. He was 20 years old. Shock, silence, and disbelief. The news spread instantly. Fans refused to believe it. Social media froze. The music world fell silent. Artists who had criticized him paused. Fans who defended him mourned. Conversations about his life, his mistakes, and his growth erupted worldwide. It felt unreal, like the story had ended mid-sentence. A world forced to reflect. After his death, opinions softened. Not because his past disappeared, but because his humanity became impossible to ignore. People began asking uncomfortable questions. Can people change? Does growth count if it's unfinished? How much time does someone deserve to prove they're different? There were no easy answers. Music after death. In the months following his passing, XXXTENTACION's music reached new heights. Albums topped charts. Songs broke streaming records. His voice reached people who had never heard him before. But listening felt different now. Every lyric felt heavier. Every emotion felt final. Instead of watching an artist evolve, fans were left imagining what could have been. Influence beyond numbers. XXXTENTACION's impact went far beyond charts. He helped normalize conversations about mental health, depression, emotional vulnerability, trauma in young men. He showed that pain didn't have to be hidden behind confidence or bravado. For an entire generation, his music became a mirror. A legacy that divides and connects. XXXTENTACION's legacy is not simple. He is remembered as deeply flawed, emotionally raw, painfully honest. Some will never forgive his mistakes. Others will never forget how his music helped them survive. Both truths exist. The cost of a fast life. His story is a reminder of how quickly life can change, especially when fame arrives before emotional stability. Talent does not protect you. Money does not heal trauma. Attention does not equal safety. Growth requires time, and time is not guaranteed. Final reflection. XXXTENTACION was not a hero. He was not a villain. He was a young man trying to fight himself in public and turning that fight into art. His life forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about pain, accountability, and redemption. And his music remains, not as perfection, but as proof that honesty can be powerful, even when it's messy. End of the story. The voice is gone, the questions remain, and the impact continues.